The military pilot explains why fighter pilots can't fly a 172.
Given its simplicity, can a fighter pilot fly a Cessna 172 without training? Very nice picture of a CAP 172. After 2 tours in the Navy flying both the F-4 and F-14, among other aircraft, and over 3,000 flight hours with an ATP, I decided one day to get checked out in a Cessna 172, which I had never flown, former U.S. Navy fighter pilot John Cheshire says on Quora. It was totally foreign to me. However, after turns, stalls, and touch and goes, my instructor said he would sign me off, but I really needed a lot more practice and training. I could not have agreed more. I was way out of my element. This was the first and last time I ever tried learning how to fly a 172. Cheshire concludes, TLDR, so yes, I could fly without any training, but not very well and not near to standards I was accustomed to. David Tussey, former U.S. Navy A-7 Corsair II pilot, recalls on Quora, possibly, but it would be extremely dangerous and very poor judgment. Military pilots know the key to safe flying is proficiency, knowledge of your aircraft's systems, and training. Lots of training, lots of practice. I have around 4,000 hours all jet, but I would not step inside a Cessna 172 without a training curriculum and an instructor pilot to teach me how to fly that airplane. It is a very different aircraft from the jets I flew, and despite being much lower performance, the 172 is perfectly capable of killing you when it impacts the ground. William Vaughn, Cessna 172 instructor, explains on Quora, well, as an instructor pilot at Boeing Field in Seattle, I was scheduled with a student who was due for a 2-year biennial flight review in a Cessna 172, some student. He was a U.S. Air Force captain who flew F-16s in Asia, but had been grounded for a few years, sort of, flying Predator drones in Afghanistan, though he would have been bit rusty, not this dude, since the slowest airplane he'd ever actually flown was the supersonic T-38 Talon. He tended at first to roar down short final approach, flying at the T-38's 170 knots approach speed. That's
only if the flaps are broken. You should not be at 170 knots in a T-38 unless the flaps aren't working.
Oh, they list on BNE for the Cessna.
No, I mean the T-38.
Okay.
The T-38 doesn't fly at 170. Thanks, Doug. That's enough.
It doesn't fly that slow, right?
No, it flies. It's 140 knots?
Oh,
135.
Depends on the
gas. on the approach. It's definitely not 170 unless the flaps aren't working.
I'm the one that put this article.
That's true. You take it away.
Well, and because it put a smile on my face because I remember. So I was a CFI for a little bit before I joined the Navy, and I my first CFI job was out of Harry Cleaver Field in New Philadelphia, Ohio, and I joined the Navy, and it's a kind of a small town, and they just I flew Hornets, and I was like a super pilot to my friends there, and I remember coming back after. I hadn't flown a Cessna in 4 years maybe. And, my family wanted to fly. And I remember going to the instructor that I was like, hey man, I need some laps. He's like, oh dude, you used to work here. You're a fighter pilot now. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah. And he's right. I took off in that. And there's something weird about flying under 100 knots. I did the same thing. I'm flying downwind I'm trying to, 140 knots in the Hornet, 50 knots is kind of what, my my eyeballs are used to. And so that's what I was trying to do. In my first landing, I floated. I mean, I had to go around, floated like halfway down the runway. So it's very valid. And, I definitely, military jets they can accelerate really well. They can slow down really well. They can turn really well. So there's a lot of performance. Little Cessna 172, there's no performance. So like you cannot get yourself in any sticky situation and hope like the performance of the airplane is going to get you out of it, because it's not. So I learned pretty quick. It actually took more piloting skill to kind of relearn stick and rudder skills, like how to fly the little 172. I know it sounds crazy. But that's why every time I would come home, I would always get a lap in the pattern with whoever the CFI was there, because I was not I was not good the first couple of attempts, and then I'd figure it out after that. But it's funny how your brain, you fly a fast jet for a while and that's what you get used to, right? So I don't know. This article was relatively accurate.
Yeah, I mean, so I will disagree to an extent on the fast versus slow, because I used to do it back in 2021. I'd go from the T-38 to the helicopter. To me, the speeds didn't matter because my brain would just adapt to whatever I was doing. But what I do agree with is what you haven't flown, whether it's currency or ever, because that's the two things that you talk about, currency, but the article kind of talks about, could a guy or girl that has been flying Tomcats or whatever jump into a Cessna and not die? Yeah, probably wouldn't die. However, they wouldn't do it. I've got a buddy with Battle Scarred Motorsports. He's always sending me like, hey, I'm going to go buy this airplane. I'm like, cool, have fun with that. He's like, hey, will you come with me and fly it? And then you can say something's wrong with it and we'll do the price down and whatever. I'm like, dude, I've never flown that. He's like, it doesn't matter. You're a pilot. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Right. Like, just because I'm a pilot doesn't mean, first of all, insurance will never sign off on that. But second, like, I've got no experience in this thing whatsoever. I'll ball this thing up, because you need at least a familiarization flight to get yourself used to it. And it's wildly different, not just speeds, but approach angle. What's the difference? A T-38 really drug in. What's a Cessna do? More of that 3 to 3.5 degree, it's a steeper looking approach because the thing, it's a different flare. Airliner, those dudes are flaring 50 feet and, some of the bigger airlines. And, you try to take that sight picture, especially when you're used to operating on big, wide runways, and then you put it on a normal GA field. You got that optical illusion. You've got all the sight pictures you're used to, and timing a flare is always tough, just in general. To go throw that into a Cessna, it is a recipe for disaster. And we don't, like T-38 or the Hornet or the Viper, you're not stalling to land. Like a Cessna, you're going to stall. Like, that's not how we land jets. We don't do that. We're more of that soft field landing kind of, flying it on. Yeah, power on. So it's just different. I would say it might be easier to go from the Cessna to the Hornet.
Yeah, 100%. I've told many Cessna pilots, I'm like, I could, if the engines were running at the end of the runway, I could put you in it. You could do a lap without dying. Yeah.
But I don't know.
If it's an airplane, you have to treat it with respect. That's the moral.
Well, yeah. And I'm just kidding about the Quora thing, but it does seem like we keep getting these articles where they make an article out of Quora. And it's, just like they made an article out of what I said on my podcast. It's so funny when they're like, we quoted former Navy pilot
Gonky,
who said no military pilot could fly a Cessna.
That guy's an idiot.
Yeah. And then you'll get somebody, Monkey and Gonky reacting to it, calling him an idiot because former fighter pilot Gonky, Rod Hartstock.
That's right.
Said,
Mombat.
Rod Hartstock with Mombat said that you can't fly the Cessna.
Oh, that's funny, dude.
That's awesome. Cool.